Hi, everyone. Welcome to Veterans Perspective. I am Jeff, your host. And today we're going to talk about the blog that came out today. I'll put the link in the description about Forgotten Wars, how Vietnam and Operation Iraqi Freedom echo each other. For those of you who do not know, I am an Operation Iraqi Freedom 1 veteran deployed in 2003 with the first phase of the war. And as the years have gone by and the way our government has treated us, the way society has ignored us, there are crazy similarities to these two wars. And so I wanted to break them down in our podcast today, which will be on YouTube and on Spotify. I haven't posted on Spotify in a while. It's been giving me some fits, but all of the videos are on YouTube. So, I haven't been doing that. And then the blog post that I will link on the bottom will be on Substack. I'm also on WordPress and on Beehive, the same blog on all three, just to get it out there as best I can. But yeah, here we go. So, yeah. Again, I fought in Iraq. Back in 2003, I was a support trooper, quartermaster, did water purification, storage, and distribution, right? Fun job. I loved my job. It was awesome. Saw some shit, did some shit, came home fucked up, like a lot of us did. Suffer from crazy PTSD, physical injuries, mental injuries, like the whole gamut, right? But let's talk about the wars, right? Because I failed at being normal every day, right? Like a lot of us do, right? Some people say Vietnam was unique, and at the time, Vietnam was unique. Some people say the war in Iraq itself was also unique, even after Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm in the early 90s, because we didn't go into Iraq and invade Iraq, right, like we did in the early 2000s. These two wars have patterns, right? They just repeat themselves in different uniforms, jungle swamp uniforms and desert camouflage, spanning different decades, but the same official spin from our government, right? Same misuse of troops and treasure. That's the big one. Loss of life for what? Loss of treasure for what? Same long list of promises from government officials. It sounded good at the podium, right? And, but it meant nothing when we all had to sit in clinics, right? Sit at the VA and try to make claims, try to get medical help and attention, right? Or when we had to explain our war to our families. This blog and this podcast is an attempt to map how these two wars echo each other, right? For those of you who don't know, I'm a historian, right? I was a history and government teacher for 12 years. And an instructional coach for 2 of those years, but I taught history and government. I have a bachelor's degree in history, a bachelor's degree in secondary education, and a master's degree in political science. Now, that's not to say I'm smarter than anyone, because I'm not. Those are just pieces of paper, but it shows that I have a background in what I'm talking about. It doesn't mean I can't be wrong. It doesn't mean that I'm perfect. It just means that I enjoy this stuff, and I'm pretty good at researching it. So it is both just like a veteran me asking for honesty and a citizen asking for better priorities. Okay. I want to show how government lies erode our trust in that government, how profits and politics misplace our national energy, and how forgetting the troops becomes a national habit. We're seeing it now with how society, our media, and our government is treating veterans by attacking our benefits, right? Which are promised to us in our contract. Okay? And at the end, I want to end with a simple ask, and I'll get to that at the end, okay? We built a shining wall to remember Vietnam, and that's great, right? I wasn't, I was like 1 year old when it was finished, so I don't remember that time. I've been to the Vietnam War Memorial, but I don't remember when it was built. It's a very, very powerful memorial. I know at the time some veterans were against it, but they kind of came around and said, okay, we needed this. But there is no memorial to the war that I fought in. It's been brushed aside. While over time, there seems to have been lessons learned from Vietnam, there seems to have been no lessons learned from Operation Iraqi Freedom. None. Zero. And we'll talk about that as we break some stuff down. Okay? The lie of purpose. Part 1. Look at the start of both wars and you see the same rhetorical pattern, the same rhetoric from our government. In Vietnam, American policy escalated after incidents in the Gulf of Tonkin. The Tonkin Gulf episodes were spun into justification for a massive increase in U.S. involvement in Vietnam. We were already involved. That involvement had slowly been escalating, but Gulf of Tonkin incident happened. The government used it to make higher escalation and put it on paper, put it through Congress, and say, hey, they're fucking with our stuff and our boats and our planes. You don't fuck with our boats. Now we're going to start blowing shit up. More so. Of course, later, much later, as documents and declassified intercepts showed, the narrative's not clear here. As we were told. It's not as clear as we were told. The incident was framed in a way that made an expansion of the war politically feasible. It looked good. It looked good politically for LBJ, the worst president of all time, in my opinion, for LBJ to ramp up the war against the communists. His domestic policies were not working. So what do? Let's fight more communists. In Iraq, we were told that a threat was imminent. Weapons of mass destruction were the central claim. I still remember, because I had joined the Army in 1999. I was a pre-9/11 enlistee. I still remember General Powell on TV with his little charts showing us these weapons of mass destruction mobile vans. Condoleezza Rice, Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, both of whom are war criminals, probably. Yeah, I said it. The talking points were sold to the American people as good faith intelligence assessments. Went on national TV. Good faith assessments. The truth that followed, including the work of the Iraq Survey Group and the Dulfer Report, made clear that the stockpiles alleged before the invasion did not exist in any militarily significant form. Now, Saddam Hussein had used chemical weapons before on his own people and on Iran in the 80s during the Iraq-Iran war. He was fucking crazy. None of that is disputed. Okay? So he definitely had access to chemical weapons. But they purposely used the phrase weapons of mass destruction because that can be so broad. Right? The trigger for an invasion was cast in a way many in power wanted to believe. They wanted this war. Right? We were already in Afghanistan. This is only a couple years removed from 9/11. Congress is favorable to this. The American people are like, yeah, go get those terrorists. And it sounded good. It looked good. The pattern is the same. First, it's a story that makes military action seem urgent. Then a rapid policy commitment by both the executive and the legislative. Then a lesson about the limits of the intelligence. This is what we know. This is how much we know. And this is what we think we should do about it. By the time the lesson arrives, the escalation has already produced destruction. By the time we know, hey, this really isn't what it is, Gulf of Tonkin was a lie. Weapons of mass destruction were a lie, but we didn't know. We presented this intelligence in good faith. We were trying. We tried. Turned out to be a lie, but hey, we already blew shit up. We're already there. Might as well keep going. That destruction and loss, that stuff cannot be reversed. You can't take back a bomb. You can't take back a bullet. What that means in human terms is straightforward. Men and women go where politicians decide to send them. That's how wars work. That's how wars have worked throughout history. They do so on the strength of promises, of briefings, and of official storylines that make risk tolerable. When those stories collapse, the people who paid the price are the ones left with the permanent bills. The misuse of troops and treasure. You want numbers? Here they are, without quieting the language. Those of you that know me, I'm not going to quiet the language. I'm not going to pull any punches. Vietnam cost lives by the tens of thousands, and even the millions if you factor in the Vietnamese. Including civilians, military, and non-combatants combined. Okay? The American death toll listed by official tallies when the conflict ended is over 58,000 U.S. service members. 58,000. For what? For what? From day one. For what? To stop the spread of communism? Look, I get it. It was a different time. Right? The Cold War was different. People had a different mindset when it came to communism. But that seems a little far-fetched to keep that going. Operation Iraqi Freedom and the wider post-9/11 wars in the region, including Afghanistan, have costs that are staggering in a different way. Yes, there's loss of life. The financial accounting of these wars run into the trillions of dollars. Estimates from independent research put the long-term fiscal and human costs in the range of many trillions of dollars, and a crippling downstream budget for veterans care that will continue for decades, that they continue to underfund. The government underfunds the care of veterans. Okay? People can cry and moan and complain all they want about veterans' benefits. The VA is underfunded, and y'all know it. Y'all know it. The number of U.S. military deaths in Iraq is obviously lower than Vietnam numerically. Roughly 4,400 reported U.S. deaths in Iraq since 2003. But the total human toll, including wounded, psychologically scarred, and displaced, is massive and ongoing. The Iraq war veteran, and I would probably throw in the Afghani war veteran. I didn't serve in Afghanistan. So I can't really speak to that experience. Uh, a lot of us, I think, are still in the yes, I know the war started over 20 years ago, but a lot of veterans of my war have not reported their disabilities, especially now, because we're all being told that we're frauds and liars. So there's still more of us out there. And if you're one of those who happen to come across this video, this podcast, please do not be afraid to report that you're not doing well, that you need help, and that you think it's related to your service. You deserve that. You deserve to be taken care of. So what do these numbers buy the country, buy the United States? In short term, sure, there's military superiority. Some level of tactical objectives are achieved, right? And the long-term costs, we did not budget for. Of course we didn't, because why would the U.S. think long-term in any fucking way? The post 9/11 wars have prolonged long-term medical and disability burdens that will require spending across generations. Okay? The Cost of War project makes the point clearly. Funding the machinery of war is easy. Funding the consequences of war is not a political priority. I'm going to say that again. Funding the machinery of war is easy. Funding the consequences of war is not a political priority. That needs to change. That misallocation shows up in other ways. Contractors thrive when conflict becomes the norm. Civilian contractors thrive. Okay? Private firms like Halliburton, BlackRock, with defense contracts, grow fat on procurement of these contracts. Money flows to hardware, not to the quiet human work of healing. Halliburton and its successors made massive sums from logistics and reconstruction contracts in Iraq. Firms tied to defense supply chain have become institutional players in policy discussions. When money flows to corporate balance sheets, it becomes harder to make the case to spend on clinics, on mental health staffing, on long-term disability care. Pay the contractor, not the warrior. Especially when those contractors have political ties. You measure priorities by where the checkbook goes. If the checkbook favors production of weapons, bases, and contractor margins over beds for rehabilitation, you are funding national power and neglecting national responsibility. If a country that claims to be morally superior, like the United States of America, has the gall to start a conflict for whatever reason, they have a responsibility to take care of the warrior who they send to that conflict. If they do not, they lose the moral high ground. And that leads us into our next section, betrayal and mistrust. Vietnam left a terrible scar on American trust. The trust between the citizens and its government. Trust between members of the military and its government. The public found out what it had been told and what had actually happened did not match. Those are called lies. The credibility gap The phrase of that era described the distance between official words and lived reality. It is as acceptable now as it was then. We expect our government to lie to us now. There is no benefit of the doubt when it comes to our government. We literally expect them to lie. Yet we still allow them to do whatever the fuck they want. After Vietnam, generations of Americans were left distrustful of institutions. Some vets were spat on, some were ignored, others were feted and still abandoned by a bureaucracy that could not or would not meet their needs. Literally left to rot. For many of us who came back from Iraq, the experience was quieter. We did not face widespread protests at the airport. Instead, we faced something that might be worse. Silence. Silence. I came home after the first year of the war, and when we came home, they put us, when we landed back in the States, they didn't let us out in the main terminal of the airport. They put us out on the tarmac with friends and family only. It wasn't a celebration of citizenry. They didn't want anyone else to see us. To me, that's wild. That was nice to see friends and family. Of course, after all that time. I was there for 14 months, or I was deployed for 14 months. Some of that time in Kuwait, most of that time in Iraq. Before that, where was I? Because it was the first phase. Fort Lewis, Washington. And then Kuwait, and then Iraq. But dead silence. The second, third, fourth year of the war, it's on the news less and less. The country moved on from my war very quickly. No one gave a shit. No one gave a shit. Yeah, at first, the signals of gratitude were there in slogans, flag decals. You saw the yellow ribbons tied around trees of the family members, right? Right after 9/11, everyone's got their fucking flags in their front yards. 3-4 years later, they're gone. Gone. And tell me I'm wrong. Lie to me and tell me I'm wrong. But once again, the institutions did not seem to translate that gratitude or forced gratitude into durable care. Once again, the system thanked veterans with platitudes, but failed them with procedure or lack of procedure. A special kind of betrayal arrives when the institutions charged with looking after veterans are slow, incompetent, or corrupt. The Phoenix VA scandal remains an emblematic example. Okay? That's the VA system that I went through. And I lived in California. I ignored my symptoms for years because I thought and was told in a lot of ways, you're fine. Your back, your knees, your ankles, your neck. That's all just part of being in the military. Because in my day, if you went to sick call, you were a bitch. You were weak. Take some Motrin, drink some water, do your fucking job. That's why none of us have records. Literally, that's why none of us have records. Because none of us went to sick call. We just did our fucking jobs. Hurt. I knew something was wrong. Not just physically, but mentally. But I shut it down. I buried it. I did what I was told to do as a man by society. and as a trooper, by my command. Do your job. Do your job. So I did. I shut up shop. I moved on with life. Hell, I went to school. I moved from California to Arizona with some friends, settled myself in, found a job, left that job, went back to school, met my now wife, started teaching, got a job teaching online because I thought that was the wave of the future. And I was like, hey, cool, that sounds awesome. I got my degree in education. I was like, cool, online teaching sounds awesome. I think that's going to be big. Did that. And my wife and I had a couple kids, and I yelled at my 2-year-old, and this might be getting way too personal, but but this is real life. I yelled at my then 2-year-old because they didn't pick up their toys. And when I say yelled, I mean like next level. Like anger, seething anger yelled. To where my wife looked at me and said, something's wrong. We need to do something about that. And my wife is a saint. She wasn't mad at me. She was mad at the situation. Right? And she said, we need to get back with the VA and figure out what the fuck is going on. Because before that, I had tried with the VA, and the Phoenix VA told me I wasn't a veteran, holding my DD-214 in my hand, and came back and said, you don't have enough records to show that you're disabled. I'm like, what? All right. And then I just moved on. I was like, okay, fine. I'm not disabled. Fuck it. Let's live life. That's how we were treated. And then when we went back, this was right after the Phoenix VA scandal. For those of you that don't know, in Phoenix, the system failed in the most literal way. Okay, and they have corrected themselves for the most part. Appointments were hidden from files, wait lists were manipulated, and people died having been denied timely care. This wasn't an abstract failure. It was a deadly failure. The lessons of Phoenix should have been a turning point for institutional reform, not just at the VA, but at the federal government. And it wasn't. At the Phoenix VA, yes, they have done nothing but improve. I will give them a lot of credit. Right? There's still work to be done. They're not done, and they know they're not done. But I go to that VA still to this day, and they have been nothing but accommodating in a good way with me and my experience, where I can't speak to anyone else's experience, for the most part. In many ways, the reforms from the top, from the Department of Veterans Affairs and the federal government, have been partial. Consequences continue to reverberate in the lives of veterans and their families. The result of that failure at an institutional level is mistrust. Veterans should not mistrust their government, and we do. And we do. And we have since Vietnam. Maybe since Korea. Veterans do not trust the official line because we've watched systems fail us over and over and over again. And then when they fail us, they blame us for it happening. And then we have ass clowns like Lieutenant Colonel Gade, who's a veteran, saying we don't deserve the things we're getting and we should all just go back to work. We do not trust politicians who mount a stage, thank us for our service, and then refuse to allow us the basic things that keep veterans alive. and safe. Our mistrust, some people say, is irrational. That's dumb. Our mistrust is beyond rational because promises have not been kept. Our contract has continually been broken. We are underfunded compensationally, and we are underfunded medically. And if you don't believe that, you're lying to yourself. And it's because of these two wars. When the government fucks up, they don't want to admit that fuck up by helping the veterans that fought in those wars. Helping us admits that they were wrong. The Forgotten Stone. Again, we built a powerful physical memory for Vietnam. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial on the Mall, Washington, D.C. is one of the most visited memorials in the country, right? It's amazing. People trace names with their fingers. They weep and cry. I cried when I was there. The wall forces a public confrontation with loss, right? It's a place of mourning, but also of accountability, right? It is permanent. It's a permanent admission that something happened here that demanded remembrance. For Iraq, there is no equivalent. There's no equivalent. Okay? Veterans and families have launched initiatives to create a joint Iraq-Afghanistan memorial on the National Mall. I'm talking about a national monument. Okay? Not a state one, not a local one. A national monument. It remains years away and contested in the halls of Congress. Imagine contesting this. Okay, we can tear down statues, but we can't build one. Several states and private groups have built memorials that matter locally, right? But at the federal, national level, there is no single established memorial with the same gravity as the Vietnam Wall. That omission matters. It is a cultural decision about what we choose to remember and what we choose to let fade. Why does that omission matter? Because memorials are not just stone and bronze. They are statements about national memory, about which sacrifices the country admits to. A national memorial for Vietnam became a site of national reckoning. It forced conversation about that war. It made lying more costly for the government because there was a public place to confront the consequences. If the country refuses to build a comparable remembrance for Iraq and Afghanistan, what it is signaling is plain and clear. It is signaling that these conflicts can become footnotes, which I would argue that they've already become. It's signaling that the durable human costs are not worthy of the same national attention as other wars. That choice is a political decision with human consequences. Our government will very quickly bring a Gold Star family member to a speech or an event from those wars, from Iraq and Afghanistan. But they won't give those Gold Star families a national place of remembrance to remember their loved ones by. Think about that. They'll use them as a political pawn, but they'll sweep their fucking wars right under that rug quickly. The media and the manufacture of consent. Next section. Both wars were accompanied by media narratives that simplified and sanitized complicated realities. In Vietnam, the press played complicated roles. It was the first real televised war. The reporting that exposed atrocities and mismanagement was there. There's also reporting that followed official channels and reflected official optimism, right? It was like a conundrum, right? There was the official side, and then there were the rogue reporters who were like, hey, there's some fucked up shit going on around here, right? The degree of caution and skepticism varied. So, and then what that does, the American people are like, I don't know what's real. They're like, what? The result was powerful journalism, but also uneven public understanding. Right? They're like, well, which one do I believe? The administration's ability to frame the narrative mattered. I.e., Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon. It took time for the public to reassemble the story and to hold officials accountable. There should only be one story when it comes to wars that matter from the media, and that's the truth. And we have a problem with our media today. They don't tell it. It's plain and simple. Because it's about ratings, not what's right. Just look at the Washington Post and how they're treating veterans right now. It's about ratings, clicks, reposts, not what's right. They don't care what's right. In Iraq, the media environment was different, but the pattern certainly remained. Early reporting often parroted official claims, especially about the weapons of mass destruction, and the accepted intelligence at face value. They took it at face value. I don't blame the media for that because that's what they were told too. Okay? Later, as the Iraq Survey Group and other reporting showed the lack of WMD stockpiles, the public perception did shift. But by then, the policies were set and the costs were already inflicted. You can't take them back. The media, for all its capacity, did not always provide the sustained, skeptical accounting that might have prevented escalation or at least forced more cautious policymaking. The media was afraid to call out President Bush and to speak out against the war on terror. In a post 9/11 world, they wanted no business calling out President Bush and saying, hey, you shouldn't be doing this. They would have been run out of town. That is piss poor reporting. And they should not have been doing that. But it's what I expect from the media, who I have no love for. And I don't care what news organization it is. It is tempting to blame the press alone. Don't do that. Right? I talk bad about the media all the time because they're ass clowns, right? But they are not the only ones to blame. In fact, they're probably towards the bottom of the pile. Many institutions are complicit. The one to blame is the government, right? The press is under pressure from their corporate owners, their corporate overlords. They'll pretend like they're a free media. Oh, we're protecting democracy. Fuck you. You're working for your corporate overlords and your own lobby groups, right? Okay? From partisan frames, from the speed of the news cycle that rewards shouting instead of careful reporting, but the effect is the same. When coverage prioritizes spectacle over context, citizens are deprived of the ability to evaluate policy decisions fully. That deficit kills trust in the media and ultimately trust in the government. Let me say that again. Okay, let me say that again. When media coverage prioritizes spectacle over context, citizens are deprived of the ability to evaluate policy decisions fully. That deficit kills trust that citizens have in their media and ultimately their government. The cost we still pay. The Cost of War Project calculates staggering long-term liabilities for post 9/11 conflicts. The direct war expenditures are clearly large, right? The cost to care for veterans, to cover disability, to handle mental health needs, to provide for families will continue for generations, as they should, and they should increase with inflation. Those are commitments the nation made that they're trying to unmake. Sometimes they are made inadvertently. When you start a war, you just made that commitment. Don't start a war unless you're going to take care of the warrior. We also cannot ignore the human ledger. Thousands injured, tens of thousands suffering from chronic conditions, millions in the wider region displaced or killed. Those are numbers that do not fit easily on a campaign sign or a news cycle. They are kind of slow suffering that demands long-term public investment in healthcare, rehabilitation, employment support, and community rebuilding. When budgets prioritize weapons, contractors, and overseas bases over clinics, mental health staffing, and benefits that meet need, the country chooses machines over people. We talk about the rise of AI and be like, oh, we shouldn't be funding AI. We shouldn't be funding AI. We already do. We already do. What the fuck do you think goes into a laser-guided missile system? Or a drone program? Because they take away benefit money to fund that shit. Y'all scream that because you heard somebody else do it. The human cost of war is not just the war. It's what happens after. It's what happens after. What remembrance should mean. A memorial is not just a tourist stop. It's a place of education, of moral pause. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial forces the country to look and to reckon. A memorial for Iraq and Afghanistan would do the same. It would not be an endorsement of policy. It would be an admission of cost and loss. To build that memorial is not to decide who was right or wrong about policy. It is to say that human beings suffered and died and that the nation will remember them. It is a small corrective to decades of neglect. I know some people are nervous about a memorial because it might inflame politics. I don't give a fuck. To that I say, politics is already inflamed. It's going to remain inflamed for the remainder of our lives. I do not care. The politics that matters is how we choose to honor people who bled and suffered. A memorial is the place where civic memory can be renovated into a lesson. It can be a place where we refuse the easy pattern of forgetting. We cannot forget these wars. We cannot forget these wars, nor the people who died fighting in them. Accountability, not avoidance. If you want a list of what needs to change, here it is bluntly. First, admit the past. That does not mean confessing to every alleged sin of policy in a courtroom. Okay? It means being honest about the facts we now know and recognizing the human cost. That admission is the prerequisite for reform. Second, fund the long-term care properly, and it should not be touched. In fact, it should be added to. If the country can pay for a decades-long procurement schedule for aircraft and naval systems, it can pay for claims processing, mental health care, specialized clinics, and caregiver support. This is a matter of political will, not scarcity. Third, reform the procurement and oversight system that funnels money into private contractors without sufficient transparency. Stop giving military contractors a bunch of fucking money without holding them accountable for how they use that money, because that's what happens. The waste is incredible. Those contractors have a role to play, and I appreciate that role. I worked with some of them. They should not be the tail that wags the policy dog. Fourth, insist on better journalism and civic responsibility. News media, I'm speaking directly to you. Be better. Seek the truth. Speak the truth. Fuck your corporate overlords. And corporate overlords, shut up. You make enough money. The public needs reporting that does not simply amplify official narratives or sensational anecdotes. Okay, it needs investigative, patient coverage that demands accountability. Veterans and citizens alike deserve that. Fifth, build the memorial for Iraq and Afghanistan veterans now. Do it with the same seriousness as previous national memorials. Make it a place that calls citizens to remember and to question. Make it a place that honors the living as much as the dead. Why does all this matter to me? Yes, I'm a veteran, right? I write this as someone who's seen the machinery up close. I served. I taught when I could. I tried to be a husband and a father when the decision I made and the decisions made for me collided. My wife, Carrie, rearranged her life to take care of me when the system could not. And then, because of her, got me into the system in the right way. It's not a story for headlines. It's a lifetime of small crises that add up to catastrophe. Because there's a lot of people like me that don't have someone like her that have no way in. And bad things happen to some of those people. Some of those veterans. We cannot be a country that thanks veterans with slogans and then files their needs under bureaucracy. We cannot be a country that spends unconscionable sums of money on machines of war that then completely avoids the human cost of those decisions. We learn from history when we admit it. We refuse it when we repeat the same patterns. Vietnam and Iraq deserve something more than footnotes. They deserve truth and remembrance. They deserve the kind of civic care that honors service with substance. Conclusion. This has gone on long enough. This is not a plea for pity. This is a demand for responsibility. The pattern we see from Vietnam to Iraq is not a series of isolated features. It is a national habit. The habit is easy to break. It starts with facts, with honest reporting, with budgets tied to human need, and with civic memory that refuses to shrug. If you believe in supporting the troops, then support means more than words. It means money for care used in the right way. Demand that of your representatives. For the right things, with the right oversight. It means memorials that force us to look and learn. It means holding leaders accountable when they choose paths that cost lives. We owe the people who fought in Vietnam and in Operation Iraqi Freedom a simple debt. Remember, learn, do better. Please leave your thoughts and comments down below. I will post a link to the blog in the description. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode of Veterans Perspective. Please make sure you like and follow. And I look forward to our next conversation. Thanks, guys.